May I remind members of the social distancing measures in place throughout the campus, in particular to remind members to observe these while entering and leaving the chamber. The next item of business is portfolio questions, questions on finance. Again, I remind members to press the request to speak button if they wish to ask a supplementary. And we start with question number 1. Mark Ruskell.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what changes to taxation it can make to address the reported widening inequality between small retail businesses and large corporations as a result of COVID-19.
Minister Ben Macpherson.
Thank you, President Officer. The Scottish Government is restricted by the devolution settlement in what changes to taxation it can make to address any inequality between small retail businesses and large corporations. We are committed to delivering a taxation environment that is fair and sustainable for all taxpayers, and where we do have powers, for example through non-domestic rates, we have taken the decision to prioritise small businesses through the Small Business Bonus Scheme, which is more generous than any of the equivalent schemes elsewhere in the UK, lifting more than 117,000 ratepayers out of rates altogether.
I think before I ask Mr Ruskell to ask a supplementary question, we will pause a moment just to ensure that the sound is fully operational.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I ask the question now?
Mark Ruskell.
Thank you. Yesterday's announcement from Tesco that it will validly repay £585 million worth of rates relief has been warmly welcomed, but it represents only one of several mega retailers who have benefited during the pandemic. So can I ask the Minister what discussions will take place with other large retailers about similar voluntary measures? Is the Scottish Government able to ring-fence these repaid reliefs for supporting smaller retailers in the high street? Or what discussions will the Scottish Government have with the UK Government on the possibility of an additional windfall tax through the corporation tax scheme for those companies who've seen astronomical profits during the pandemic?
Minister Ben Macpherson.
Thank Mr Russell for that question, and would welcome the announcement from Tesco yesterday, as has been recorded by the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, and also the further follow-ups today from a number of other big retailers that they intend to follow a similar path to that of Tesco. The Scottish Government has committed yesterday in the remarks from the Cabinet Secretary to utilise those resources that are being returned to support businesses here in Scotland through other mechanisms and means to consider in due course. With regard to a windfall tax, the Scottish Government is engaged, as you would expect, with the UK Government on a windfall tax. That is something that would require either permission from Treasury through the mechanisms in the current Scotland Act, if the Scottish Government was to have locus on the determination of such a tax, or of course to be delivered by the UK Government, and we encourage the UK Government to use its powers to make tax decisions and policy in a progressive way and continue to have dialogue on them when it comes to reserve taxes and new taxes like a windfall.
Thank you, Minister. A supplementary question from Angus MacDonald.
Thank you, President Officer. As the Minister has just alluded to in his initial reply, the vast majority of powers over taxation remain reserved, clearly limiting what the Scottish Government can do to address any inequalities. So does the Minister agree that further powers over taxation should be devolved as soon as possible to better enable a Scotland-specific response to COVID?
Minister.
Yes, absolutely. The Scottish Government believes that all tax powers should be devolved to the Scottish Parliament so that fiscal decisions which affect the people of Scotland can be made here in Scotland. Devolution of tax levers would enable us to tailor measures to fit Scottish needs and circumstances as we build the path to economic recovery. Having all the powers would also enable us to deliver a comprehensive, progressive and competitive suite of tax policies, and the more powers that we can bring together coherently, the better.
Further supplementary question from Jackie Bailey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Tesco's was yesterday, Morrison's is today. Who knows who will come tomorrow? So I'm keen to know what action the Scottish Government will take to actively encourage these businesses to return their business rates relief when they've made a substantial profit during the pandemic. How quickly do you think they'll receive the money back? And of course, how quickly will you ensure it goes out the door to businesses that are truly struggling?
Minister.
Thank you. I again would refer to the Cabinet Secretary's statement, public statement yesterday in this regard. Of course, the updates have been rapid in the last 24 hours from supermarkets engaging on this point, and the Scottish Government continues to engage with large retailers as appropriate, and we encourage those who are still considering this point to consider the nature of the way in which Tesco and other large retailers' moves on this point have been well received in the public domain, and to consider the maximum good use of public finances in these times, and returning these reliefs in a period where large retailers have made substantial profit is absolutely the right thing to do. And we continue to liaise with large retailers as well as with the UK Government on these points.
Question number 2, Stuart Stevenson.
To ask the Scottish Government what its latest engagement has been with the UK Government regarding the funding provided to support the economic recovery from COVID-19.
Cabinet Secretary Kate Forbes.
Ahead of the UK spending review last week, I wrote to the Chancellor stressing the importance of delivering a fiscal stimulus package which would support businesses and households whilst regenerating the economy, points I reiterated on the morning of the spending review. Sadly, instead we had a cut to the Scottish Government's capital and financial transactions budget. We had a freezing of public sector pay rises for many hard-working frontline staff. He ignored the proposed £9.21 national minimum wage and failed to replace EU funding in full or even offer a proper plan on how to do so.
Stuart Stevenson.
Many countries such as France, Germany and New Zealand have brought forward substantial economic stimulus packages in response to COVID. The Cabinet Secretary has just described a response from the UK Government. Does she think that they have articulated an argument that says that that will actually help us, or is it otherwise?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, we have seen in other countries that Stuart Stevens has just mentioned a much more generous economic stimulus than we had from the Chancellor last week. And as I've already said, ahead of the spending review, I did urge the Chancellor to follow the lead of those countries and prioritise public services and economic recovery through a fresh stimulus. Now, we had suggested that should be at least 5% of GDP, which would equate to £98 billion. And that investment is even more necessary given the uncertainty caused by the reckless approach to EU exit. Headlines today continue to prove that point. As we know, the UK spending review did fall far shorter than this, which can only make it harder for us to deliver that fairer, greener and more prosperous Scotland that we all want to see.
Supplementary question from Murdo Fraser. I'm afraid we don't have sound for Mr Fraser at the moment. If it's possible, we may come back to question number 3 from Ian Gray.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government how much it has allocated to the Strategic Framework Business Fund.
Cabinet Secretary.
The support package offered through the Scottish Strategic Framework Business Fund is available to all eligible businesses from the 2nd of November, and it will continue to be made available indefinitely whilst levels remain under review. And as he will appreciate, it's very difficult to forecast what the cost will be because it is a demand-led programme that will last indefinitely. But on top of that, we've also allocated over £30 million to local authorities to have discretion over payments to businesses that still need support.
Ian Gray.
Thank you. Since East Lothian was happily moved into level 2 of the framework, one group of businesses have found themselves having to have recourse to the business fund when they would rather not. These are so-called wet pubs, which are forced by law to close because they do not have a kitchen on the premises, even if they do have a beer garden. And identical premises with a kitchen on site can open. These businesses want to open, but are forced to make a demand on the Business Support Fund through an illogical aspect of the law underpinning the framework. Will the Cabinet Secretary look at this again?
Cabinet Secretary.
The question that Ian Gray raises has more to do with the businesses that are captured in each level rather than the support available. When it came to establishing the levels, we tried to make clear that we didn't want a single business to be closed any longer than it had to be, and try to make it as fair and realistic as possible. In terms of the specifics about the wet pubs, perhaps he could write to me, or if he wants to clarify right now, the point that he's making.
Ian Gray.
Thank you very much for that invitation to clarify. This is not about the differences between levels. This is about one business and another business on the same level carrying out exactly the same business, but one from a premises which has a kitchen on the site and the other does not. One is forced to close by law, the other is allowed to open by law.
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, and that's what I was alluding to in my first answer, that it has to do with the fact that the restrictions have detail on businesses that are able to provide food, for example, on what time they're closed and whether or not they provide alcohol. And all those points are captured in the restrictions. When it came to capturing the right businesses in the right levels, we tried to make sure that no businesses would be required to close longer than they had to, and those levels will remain under review.
Supplementary question from Sandra White.
On the issue of business support, Cabinet Secretary, can you provide an update as to the impact the delay to the UK budget has had on the Scottish Government's ability plan business support in the longer term?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the challenge throughout the last few months has been planning ahead and forecasting costs and finding support for those costs when it was UK Government policy announcements that generated consequentials, sometimes after the need in Scotland. Now, the UK Government changed its approach to guaranteeing the consequentials, which was very helpful. But what we don't have is a guarantee for next year. So the delayed UK autumn budget, the autumn budget is usually the basis on which we set our own budget, but the delay to that means that there are huge uncertainties for us, particularly in terms of knowing what changes may occur to tax policies. And clearly, businesses are facing challenges now. Those challenges won't end at the end of this financial year. They will continue into the next financial year. So it's important that we can provide that long-term clarity to them, which is a clarity and a certainty that's denied to us as a result of the UK budget being delayed.
We'll go back to Murdo Fraser for his supplementary to the previous question. Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I hope you can now hear me. I was going to ask the Cabinet Secretary in relation to the previous question. We know that the Treasury have guaranteed an additional minimum £8.2 billion in the current financial year. Last week, we heard from the well-respected Fraser of Allender Institute that they believe that of this, there is currently £1 billion uncommitted. And this at a time when so many businesses, as we've heard, are crying out for additional financial support. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, are the Fraser of Allender Institute correct? If they're not correct, what is the correct sum? And when will we get a full report to Parliament on the allocation of these funds?
Cabinet Secretary.
In terms of the point on a report, the member will know that the spring budget revision is due to be published in February, but in full understanding that the Parliament and the Finance Committee want as much transparency as possible on those figures, I committed to write to the Finance Committee in December, and we're now in December, so that should be relatively soon with additional information. Now, where the Fraser of Allender is right is to highlight that the changes that the UK Government have made to how they generate and provide us with Barnett consequentials has actually been very helpful in that it provides a guarantee. What it means, though, is that the consequentials that are generated are divorced from the money that actually comes to us, if that makes sense. So it's very difficult to link announcements that are made by the UK Government with the funding that we have here. The second point I would make is that whilst we forecast as many of the costs as possible, whether that's to do with transport systems, vaccinations or business support, when additional funding is made available, like the £1 billion, which is very welcome, it does mean that we need to ensure that that money is out the door as quickly as possible, that we provide the certainty and the transparency to Parliament, but that we also ensure that we can fund initiatives and programmes all the way up to the end of the financial year. So in terms of the Strategic Business Fund, it will be demand-led up to the end of the financial year. I need to ensure that there's sufficient cover for that, for deployment of the vaccine programmes and for other costs that are still, at this point in time, uncertain.
Question number 4, Willie Rennie.
To ask the Scottish Government what financial support it can give to businesses that face an increase in their non-domestic rates because they have invested in renewable energy and decarbonisation.
Minister Ben McPherson.
Rateable values are derived by independent assessors on the basis of the notional rental value that a property could be expected to achieve on the open market. Where a property is improved for any reason, its rateable value may increase accordingly. The Scottish Government provides the unique Business Growth Accelerator relief, which suspends increases in rates liabilities due to property improvements and expansions for 12 months, and also provides the UK's most generous package of reliefs for the renewable energy sector. Financial support is available to rural SMEs seeking to develop renewable energy projects in Scotland through the Community and Renewable Energy Scheme. In addition, support is provided through the Smart Export Guarantee obligation and through its predecessor, the Subsidy Feed-in Tariff Scheme, which closed on the 31st of March 2019.
Willie Rennie.
But Metaflake and St Andrews were keen to reduce their carbon footprint by installing solar panels, but they could not afford the system of over 50 kilowatts because it would cost them thousands of pounds in extra business rates. This doesn't make sense when we're trying to battle climate change. So why is the government penalising businesses that are trying to do their bit on climate change? I know this was a part of the Barclay review, but what I want to get an indication from the Minister is whether he's prepared to look at this again to provide the necessary support to incentivise these businesses.
Minister.
I'd be happy to receive correspondence from Mr Rennie on that specific case and to hear from the Liberal Democrats on views on how to support in this regard in terms of the forthcoming budget process. Properties that have invested in renewable energy and decarbonisation may be eligible for the Business Growth Accelerator relief as things stand, and also we also provide a non-domestic rate exemption for renewables for subjects with a capacity of up to 50 kilowatts, which is in reference to what Mr Rennie mentioned. So keen to hear more on the case that Mr Rennie highlights and look forward to written correspondence and further engagement with them on these.
Question number 5, James Dornan.
Scottish Government, what its latest engagement has been with the UK Government regarding plans to replace EU funding.
Cabinet Secretary.
We have had very little meaningful engagement across a number of programmes, including fisheries, structural funds and competitive programmes like Erasmus Plus and Horizon Europe. We've been clear and consistent in our position that we expect full replacement of EU funding from the end of December to ensure no detriment to Scotland's finances and for the UK Government to fully respect the devolution settlement in any future arrangements. Unfortunately, the spending review last week has provided little clarity on those replacement funds for a number of EU programmes, particularly structural funds, Erasmus and Horizon.
James Dornan.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, depressing though it is. But Scottish ministers have delivered EU funding programmes successfully for decades. Is there any further clarification as to whether full control of replacement funding will be given to Scotland? And does she agree that a failure to do so would just clearly constitute a power grab?
Kate Forbes.
It's still very unclear whether full control of some replacement EU programmes funding, particularly structural funding, will be given to Scotland. The Internal Markets Bill, as introduced, included provisions that presume Whitehall control over the delivery of EU programme funding replacements in Scotland, a programme that Scottish ministers have delivered successfully for decades for the sake of our communities, for businesses, for research institutes, and any attempt by the UK Government to introduce powers which give them full scope to reduce or to redistribute replacement EU programme funding in areas of devolved competence would be a clear assault on our devolved spending powers. It's not just the Scottish Government that says that, it is also the Welsh Government and the Northern Irish Executive as well. And it does disrupt productive relationships which we have forged with stakeholders over the course of many years, creating the potential for confusion, duplication and unnecessary additional bureaucracy.
Question number 6, Liz Smith.
To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it's having with local authorities regarding their future funding settlement.
Minister Ben McPherson.
As you would expect, particularly in these challenging times, the Scottish Government meet with COSLA and local authorities on a regular basis to discuss constructively a range of issues, including the future funding settlements. And negotiations on the annual Scottish Local Government Finance Settlement are conducted between the Scottish Government and COSLA on behalf of all 32 local authorities.
Liz Smith.
Could I thank the Minister for that response? The Scottish Government is constantly complaining about the uncertainty which they believe that the UK Government has forced upon it for budget planning. But have they considered the uncertainty that they are forcing on local authorities by giving no indication of how they might benefit from some of the £2.2 billion of Barnett consequentials, about which as yet they have not disclosed any of the allocation?
Minister.
As stated in my first answer, we engage with COSLA on a regular basis, whether it's on consequential announcements or other aspects of funding, and continue to do so, to work constructively to support our colleagues in local government in this challenging time, and so that we can respond collectively and as effectively as possible.
Question number 7, Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how much funding it plans to allocate to projects in Lothian that will help support people and jobs.
Well, supporting people and jobs is at the very heart of our pandemic response, and the 4 Lothian councils have been allocated an additional £70 million to help meet the challenges posed by COVID, plus a further £162 million to support local businesses. The infrastructure investment plan includes a range of projects in Lothian, including new schools and healthcare facilities, and that's in addition to our £300 million investment in the Edinburgh and South East City Region deal. Lothian residents will also benefit from the tens of millions of pounds we're investing across Scotland in initiatives that will help people find and secure employment.
Miles Briggs.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Edinburgh City Council has stated to the Scottish Government that a replacement for Liberton High School is Edinburgh Council's top priority for funding from ministers. I'd like to pay tribute to both the school and to the Parent Council for the campaign they have ran over many years now to secure a replacement new school for the local community. So can I therefore ask the Cabinet Secretary when an announcement is likely to be from Scottish ministers, and whether or not Liberton High School will finally get the funding it needs to be replaced?
I'm very aware of the campaign, and like other members across the Chamber, we all take a great interest in when the next funding for the replacement of school estates will be made. I know the Deputy First Minister is actively working on that and hopes to make an announcement in due course.
Question number 8, Jamie Halker-Johnson.
Government what additional funding is made available to its enterprise agencies which have been supporting economic recovery during the pandemic.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, throughout the course of the pandemic, Scottish Enterprise, Highlands and Islands Enterprise and the South of Scotland Enterprise have reprioritised activity to help businesses and communities and support economic recovery in their respective areas and regions. And as a result of additional funding made available by the Scottish Government, over £144 million has been distributed by the enterprise agencies through the Creative Tourism and Hospitality Enterprises Hardship Fund, which I know many of Jamie Halker-Johnson's constituents benefited from because they are also my constituents, as well as the Pivotal Enterprise Resilience Fund. The enterprise agencies are distributing a further £14 million through the Hotel Recovery Programme.
Jamie Halker-Johnson.
Thank you. The The Cabinet Secretary will be aware that the concentration of tourism and hospitality businesses in the Highlands Islands has meant the region's economy has been hit harder than most by the pandemic. However, before Highlands and Islands Enterprise were given responsibility for administering the schemes, she mentioned they started the year with an already overcommitted resource and capital budgets. The Chief Executive has been clear that to, quote, free up budget to deal with the pandemic response, there was a need to remove or defer commitments on their normal priorities. So given the need to rebuild, will the Cabinet Secretary ensure that the extra responsibilities of the enterprise agencies are reflected with appropriate operational support? And does she now regret her government's cuts to High's operating budgets before the pandemic hit?
Cabinet Secretary.
I always regret the fact that there isn't a bigger pot of funding made available to the Scottish Government, which can then be distributed more fairly across all the public bodies, agencies and initiatives that benefit. But in terms of Jamie Halker-Johnson's question, he makes a good point, because whilst we are still responding to the immediate crisis and helping businesses that are in distress, there is also a need here to look at long-term recovery, and where there was a pipeline of businesses that were looking for funding in High's area, but also in the other two areas, we provide that funding for long-term recovery. He may be aware of the, for example, £100 million Green Jobs Fund that was announced. That will be £100 million to help businesses create new green jobs and support businesses in that pipeline. And our enterprise agencies will provide £50 million to businesses in order to do that. And more information about budget allocations will be announced on the 28th of January.
Thank you very much. That concludes portfolio questions. My apologies to those members who wish to ask supplementaries who could not be taken, but we will move on in a moment to the next item of business.